Okay, this is Dinosaurs in Space and A Major Chief Crow. I'll put a link to the track below. And that's a scientific fact. Dinosaurs are actually on the moon. There's a couple of articles about that you can find if you feel like looking this up. Dinosaurs in Space is not science fiction. They've been in space twice. And the synopsis is that the big rock that hit us 66.6 million years ago hit the Earth with such force that a lot of it splattered out into space, which left a lot of biomatter on the moon, which might explain the petrified wood moon rocks the astronauts gave to the government of Holland, but it certainly explains why they think that there are bits of dinosaurs on the moon. I'm expecting at any point there to be discovered some kind of a dino belt. Maybe a T-Rex skull could puncture the ISS. So I want to talk about the ISS today, not in the usual way, but I kind of think that the debate has purposefully ignored the elephant in the space station. And the elephant in the space station are the special effects. Every single debate in this topic myopically focuses on the curve and on math and observations from the surface, which is understandable, but in a way, I think it's kind of like reinforcing the model. I don't think you can discredit it without looking at it in its entirety, including the special effects. And those who say there aren't any special effects are making an argument out of just ignorance, as far as I'm concerned. But I want to get into the details here about why I think this is so important. So we define special effects as illusions or visual tricks used in theater, film, television, video game, amusement parks, and simulator industries to simulate the imagined events in a story or virtual world, sometimes abbreviated as SFX. And the flight director for Apollo 11 said the simulations in the 60s were so good that you wouldn't know if it was a real or a fake mission from Mission Control. So space travel is one of two things. It is either the scientific exploration into outer space or the product of movie magic and propaganda. And it can't be both. Special effects and the CGI that NASA critics often cite is the elephant in the room, and globesters are reluctant to acknowledge it. They won't even talk about it. I made Fight the Flat Earth cry just by suggesting the Challenger explosion was a psyop. He sobbed and had to cut the live stream. Red's rhetoric was confounded by the smudge. If you don't know what the smudge is, the European Space Agency puts a shadow on the Earth beneath the ISS, which is an impossibility. And it tracks with the ISS, and they said that's got to be a smudge. It couldn't be a shadow. It wouldn't be visible from that height, because from that perspective, it would appear to be blocking out entire cities. And they said it's a smudge. So I found more footage, different angles, different dates, always the same. That can only be explained if you consider that you're not looking through a camera view, but through a camera perspective within a simulated environment. And my contention is that outer space travel is simulated. So saying space is fake, it's fun and it's funny, it's triggering, but that's not really what we're saying. We're saying the concept of space as we understand it as a consensus is largely science fiction. But I'm not saying that space doesn't exist. Something's up. But we're looking at a monopoly, more or less, a de facto monopoly on who can go up there and tell us what it's like. And when we find evidences or suggestions of fakery, of simulations being presented as the real thing, it calls into question the entire infrastructure. And many people have been minimizing the significance of it. The bulging vein on the forehead of the astronaut when he flipped upside down doesn't just discredit the ISS performance on that day. This says something about the 23-year videos. not to mention every mission that has gone up there, and it implicates all of the space agencies. It's an international deception. So one example, just one, like I'm only suggesting that one would be enough to falsify it. One example of special effects could, or should anyway, it should be enough to falsify the entire construct. This is not even, as someone accused me today, this is not an all or nothing fallacy, because the space station is a hub. It connects all the world's space agencies, including Elon Musk's company. Any fakery on any part of it implicates all of them in a conspiracy to fake space travel. And I've commented on the Chinese space station, which I have been critical of because it looks like what you would get if you ordered a space station on Wish. Like it's downgraded as far as special effects. And if China was faking it, America would call them out, and vice versa. Nobody calls anybody out because they're all in on the fakery. This is just the religious pageantry of the Church of Nasatology, and the public takes it all too literally. If the International Space Station is merely simulating space, it has implications that need to be looked into. Because this would also implicate or involve media, all governments, and it calls into question even climate models, which are reliant on space-based observations. And then what about all these zero-G scientific studies? All these studies conducted over the years in zero-G, are they really in zero-G? So there's a lot at stake here, and this is why space believers treat their model like it's unfalsifiable. The use of special effects is a key issue here, as we are discussing worldview and cosmography and how we arrive at our conclusions. And when I refer to special effects, I specifically mean visual lies. Lies told with no words. Lies that fool the eyes and allow false evidence to bypass critical scrutiny. I would say visual illiteracy is a major blind spot. It's designed to be that way, but it's a critical area to look at. It's a vulnerability because they lie to you every day without speaking, just with the images. And through habit and conditioning, we've just been rendered, as I say, the general public has been given a compromised immune system by the programming. The government gave everybody mind aids. But Infinite Plane Radio does in fact inoculate you, cures it, and inoculates you against any further mind viruses. Now, our starting point for any debate on cosmography must be a mutual agreement that one, and if we're going to debate the ISS, you have to get the other guys to agree. And I couldn't get this to happen today. These individuals, I think they know they're wrong, but they can't quite put their finger on it. But I can't get them to agree that one, space travel claims as presented by NASA and other agencies are based on video and photographic evidence that is fakeable with special effects. In other words, everything they show us could conceivably be faked. And if you would dispute that, I'll just say watch Netflix, watch any science fiction movie. All you're seeing is simulated space. And then two, if fakery has been employed on any of these missions, then evidence for space travel would necessarily be falsified. We would have to call all of it into question. Can we trust video when it comes to outer space? Or do we just trust all footage coming from any space agency at all times implicitly? No scrutiny? No, it's wrong to treat it like it's unfalsifiable or that we could be lied to or propagandized. Like they wouldn't lie. So if we can't talk about it in these debates, what does it say about the validity of an orbiting laboratory? Meaning, if skepticism's not allowed, then it's not real science. And I'm just saying that we don't have any direct contact because there is a de facto monopoly over who goes to space. So it's a lot of trust me. And when we're bringing up suggestions that there are special effects being employed, it should matter. And the fact that nobody wants to talk about it stands out to me as something of an elephant in the room. Okay, we are joined by Messianic Charlatan, Nicotramus, Ted Stryker, Josh Lebsock, Roxy W, Ears Up, Flozik, Lean Dion, J Nelson. Tomanoid3 says, realistic movies, crappy TV. That's an interesting point, and I've been harping on this point for a few years because it's getting worse over time. The contemporary science fiction looks better than the ISS, and I think it's very problematic that Tom Cruise is going to film a movie on a movie set in the space station. And anything he produces will look better than what NASA's giving us, which means that there's going to be a discrepancy that I can talk about that will be obvious, and then people should be asking themselves, why does the real thing look faker than the movies? And in recent weeks, Pope Elon has even conceded that it looks like CGI. He says it looks like CGI, but it's not. But it looks like CGI. So we do have a point. Your space footage, it all looks like CGI. It all looks fake. And one of your primary space lords has told us so. Lord Laney says, so far the Psy opera is the best colloquialism I've heard to describe all the rampant fakery and hoaxery. Yeah, Psy opera, or PsyOp Entertainment Complex. And I say entertainment not to make light of it, because entertainment is where they entrain, I call it entrainment. They entrain the collective psyche to future fake news. And this is fundamental to understanding what we're talking about here every single day. Fake news becomes fake history. And those who control history, who write the history, are conquerors. They control the present. Therefore, the past and future. And this is a key point here. When we say fake news, it's not to be flippant and it's not to be partisan. We're saying that simulated news events treated as real and bipartisan, globally, these events do become history, and that matters because over time, in the aggregate, as we've been following diligently for years, we can look at the historic record, what's going in the textbooks, the official version of every one of these events, and then we know what we have observed. We have a parallel media, that's what I call it, parallelmedia.org. And this is an important concept as well, the idea that we have a concurrent record of things that consistently disputes the mainstream. Okay, so let's see here. So the PsyOp Entertainment Complex, what we're really talking about is the predictive programming, the foreshadowing, and the repetition of messaging constitutes a form of marketing and propaganda, saturating the collective psyche, inserting things into the realm of possibility that do not exist, creating echo chambers, essentially infecting people with mind viruses that they can act upon later. Post-hypnotic suggestion, mind entrainment, disguised as entertainment. And this is a standard operating procedure. It is intrinsic to how this thing works. Not every news story is a psyop, but every news story does reinforce the dominant paradigm. They do omit the same things and focus on the same things. But when I say fake news or simulated events, I'm generally referring to those events that change the trajectory of the national dialogue on this or that issue, like Trump faking getting his ear pierced by an AR-15. Like that had some significant ramifications for what followed next. And we had predicted that based on foreshadowing in the media, what truthers generally call predictive programming. Now, for years, since it started, the term, since it became popularized, predictive programming, the people who've noticed it have always been correct. It's not a coincidence. But they've always been wrong in their explanation for what it is. And we now know what it is. And this was determined by recognizing concurrent programming is as frequent as the predictive stuff, and it is beyond any sort of possibility of it being anything but the intentional synchronization of entertainment and future fake news. Again, all of it is done to fake history because they control time. The design authority, just like in Megalopolis, they kind of tell us how it works. So we talk about the news bent history. Now, I did speak a lot to some Globesters. We'll get into that. Oh, another big piece of news. Boeing satellite fell to Earth, broke into pieces. Let me go ahead and find that news story. And this is something you shouldn't know. And if you know, then it suggests something about the predictability of this and how fake it is. So I'm going to go ahead and just pose this in the form of a pop quiz question. A satellite from Boeing blew up. What number is in its nomenclature, in its designation? That's as much of a clue as I can possibly give you. I don't want to totally give it away, but you shouldn't be able to guess what number is in the name of the Intelsat. It exploded and it broke up in orbit. Intelsat's Boeing-made satellite explodes and breaks up in orbit. U.S. Space Force is tracking the 20 pieces and has observed no immediate threats. I'm sleeping with my space junk helmet on. Like, this makes me very uncomfortable. Yeah, this is called the Intelsat 33. You shouldn't know that, Lean Dion, Esteban, Maggart, 4822. You shouldn't be able to predict these things. And the reason you can, the fact that you can, underscores how fake this stuff is. This is all just hoax code, part of the agenda. And it was very timely that a Russian satellite exploded, necessitating the spacemen on the ISS to go into cover, to duck in cover, because this Russian satellite exploded just as Megalopolis hit the film festivals. And it has this theme of a Russian satellite 9/11ing New York. Okay, really quick, let me do our numbers. So far we've got about 63 people in the YouTube, 23 on Twitter, 4 on DLive, about 20 or so on Odyssey, and the audio streams generally have between 30 and 50. It's going to pick up. And Saturday is the AutoHoaxCon number 2. There's going to be some great content. Some of it's already been created. I'm working on some stuff. And I already had a slideshow to be used as the basis for an IPR deep dive on the ISS. And I'm going to go ahead and bring that out on Saturday for the AutoHoaxCon and present the various facets of ISS fakery, how the magic trick is performed, to the best of my understanding. And one of the dead giveaways, and one of the things that is a really strong argument in our favor, is the observable and consistent and predictable light diffusion, which you see on certain spacewalks, as in the light doesn't go as far as it normally does in all of their usual photography and video, where you can see the Earth with clarity. So I'm like, what's going on here? It's called light loss. And I compared it to underwater scuba divers at night and how far the light reaches in those conditions. And it's likely, or actually it's a certainty, that a lot of the dockings that you see and many of the spacewalks are indeed performed underwater in a dark swimming pool. It's that simple. And let's see, Jay Nelson also guessed 33. Josh Lebsock said, I watched an old video with Reds. He thought he won. The Globesters, however, they're passionate, but even if they may have this sense that they've won the debate, you have to remember they believe all the fake news. They believe the fake history. They live in the box. So their opinions are kind of worthless, other than from the perspective of anthropologists reverse engineering how they managed to get everybody to accept this certain premise. The premise that the footage from outer space is unquestioningly real and you can't question it. And I have a few tricks that I'm not going to reveal here on how to bring about a level of honesty when it comes to looking at these videos, because a lot of people just will reflexively say, oh, it's real, couldn't be fake. Like this cosmonaut drops a screw loudly on the floor and they're like, oh, that was microgravity. Or on Earth Day, the astronauts are passing around an inflatable globe and one of them drops it and they all reach for it, but they can't go very far because their backs are attached to some kind of a seesaw like they used in Inception for the zero G scene. And the thing goes to the floor. It's like, wait a minute. It should be floating around. Estevan says they better game up their magic. The thing is, if they game up their magic, if they improve their special effects, everything that came before looks terrible. And I'm looking at stuff from 2005, and it's hilariously bad. It's like the TikTok filters are better than what NASA used to use. And there are so many glitches. It's like a 23-year blooper reel when you get down to it. But they have made improvements incrementally over time. And one of the things they started doing was incorporating augmented virtual reality. And in one episode, and I'm saying episode because to me, the ISS is a reality TV show, one astronaut is passing a hat to the other guy who puts it on a shelf. Well, he grabs the hat, or what he thinks is the hat, and he puts it on the shelf. But the hat hasn't left the other guy's hand. So he was seeing something that wasn't there. They're interacting with virtual objects, and being new at it, they screwed up a few times. There's a really good article, one of the last interviews by Douglas Trumbull, who was the special effects guru for 2001 Space Odyssey, where he commented on how using miniatures and models 50 years ago, using organic effects, like props, looks better, ages better 50 years later than CGI from just 5 years ago, because it's going through so many changes so fast. He was just remarking that it's almost like, and I think this is purposeful, it's almost like there was a point where the realism was purposefully downplayed. It's almost like they wanted to get rid of this hyper-realism in movies and replace it with more cartoonish and comic booky stuff. It might have been intentional, but anyway, the new iterations with CGI, graphics, special effects are so rapid that, yeah, it stands out when you try something new. So I don't expect them to suddenly change. Like, for example, if the astronauts started floating around like Sandra Bullock in Gravity, people would say, why haven't you guys done this before? You'll never see an astronaut floating sideways. There are a few things you won't see them do. They'll move them when they're obviously on some kind of a rope, like a cable, like a clothesline. But there are certain things that you should see that you don't. Certain things that if you did see it, it would totally prove the existence of outer space, but they can't do certain things. I mean, there are things I would like to see. Like, I'd like to see an astronaut, cough or sneeze productively, maybe motion sickness, I don't know, sickness, but like some things you can't fake. You couldn't fake vomiting in space. You couldn't fake that. I mean, it would look ridiculous with CGI. Maybe they could, I doubt it. But if they did it and it was real, it would be unmistakably real. But you'll never see anything like that. Looks like someone stepped in here with a box of wrenches. Ted Stryker, appreciate that. Portal Complex, Haystack Sniper, Enslaved by Truth, Cleo Dessa, Michelle Kastner, Conspiracy Thug, Elsa J, Chris Diamond, Flatlander, Montgomery, Inks G, Citizen Z, Slowboy Whiteboard. You're all receiving blue wrenches. Michael Jones, Henrik, Don Kane, Stevie G, AJob2677JG5, and Lil D, Vera Armstrong. You know what I'm going to do with this is on Saturday when we have the live stream, of course, the AutoHoaxCon 2 Zoom conference, I'm just going to probably just make it live for members, and I will follow that chat. It'll also be live on other platforms for non-members, but for the people who really want to participate and be heard, you have to get into the Zoom conference to do the Q&As. American Father says, the hair is so obvious on the women. Tom Minoit says, maybe Tom Cruise will vomit in space for us. Well, Tom Cruise's hair creates a huge problem. And I called this out. I goaded NASA. The movie ISS didn't have one loose hair. Despite having two female characters, the hair was slicked back, ponytailed, There was not one loose hair. Why? Because if they had flowy CGI hair, it would look realer than the ISS. Because what they do with the astronauts is they gel and hairspray out the hair till it's sticking up rigid, and it's hilariously bad. Where Medusa's up there right now. It's kind of interesting. We were always talking about Greek mythology. It's like you've got Space Odyssey, then you have the Calypso capsule, which has them stranded, and Calypso is the nymph in the Odyssey who keeps Odysseus stranded. So we were talking about the Space Odyssey and this kind of subtext to the mission, and we actually have Medusa up there. But yeah, so Tom Cruise is going to be up in space, and is his hair going to stick out, or is he going to shave it? I mean, what's he going to do? It's going to be a problem. If his hair isn't sticking up like Medusa's, if it looks flowy and like it does in like some of these Netflix movies, these special effects you see in science fiction, it's going to induce cognitive dissonance. Watch him cancel the mission over the hair thing. American Father says exactly, plus women's hair gets on everything. It would be all over the space station too. You know what would actually convince me the space station was real? A cat. Bring a cat into space and just pass it around from astronaut to astronaut. You could not get a cat into a harness. You couldn't dangle a cat from a bungee cord or attach it to a seesaw. I don't think you could get a real cat involved in something so low as faking space. But anyway, unless they were really in zero G, it would be obvious. They've taken other things to space. They've taken mice, for example. But when they show you the footage of the mice in space, it's usually incoherent. Like it was just had these mice running in a loop. It didn't look like zero G. They weren't floating around. I could give them a few things like get your iPhone in space, hit record on the camera, and pass it around. Just let us see. See, my contention is that we're at a magic show, and we're looking where the magicians tell us to look. We're sitting in our seats. And from the seat, you cannot debunk what you're seeing. The only way to possibly see through the illusion is to either have their manuals and know how it's done, or get out of your seat and get other perspectives. So we're not seeing enough perspectives. We're seeing a terrible magic show. Angst G says, imagine how disgusting the space station would be if it were real. Yuck. Jay Nelson says, the mouse was an ice crystal. I'm willing to accept that Mousegate was nothing more than an ice crystal. I'm willing to accept that. But we have to just agree then that it's amazing on a mission dubbed the Mighty Mouse mission, where genetically modified mice are being sent to space. There's an ice crystal on the outside of the rocket at Mach 8 that forms itself into the shape of a mouse and walks around. Like, to me, that's incredible. That's amazing. And I can't find any space believers who see it as amazing. All they can say is, nuh-uh, it's not a mouse. And it's like, I didn't say it was a mouse. It wouldn't be possible for a mouse. First of all, it would be like it's the size of a dog. I mean, it's way oversized. So it's obviously a joke. But we're just saying it's an anomaly worth pointing out. And everybody's just, they don't want to talk about it. And we know we're right. And that's a important consideration here. We know we have the right answer. We know what was going on. Elon Musk knows we know, because he put the head of security at Starlink up to the task of spying on us. Lean Dion says, when Kelly snuck a gorilla suit up there, weird acting troupe. I think it's weird they had a trumpet for 9/11 and they played taps. And they were listening to Tom Clancy's Sum of All Fears on 9/11/2001 as an audiobook. So imagine this. The cosmonauts and the one astronaut are listening to Tom Clancy, and then they look out the window and they see smoke on the on the Twin Towers. And back then they use a handheld camera. They don't do that anymore. So they have a handheld camera at the window of the ISS looking at 9/11, and it looks like a model. It looks so fake. And they say, wow, this is just like the book we were listening to. And Again, Sum of All Fears has been credited with a lot of predictive programming built into it. He's been widely known for this. And after he says this, he pulls out a trumpet and he plays taps. It's actually a pretty funny episode. I'll have to go back and play that for y'all. Ted Stryker says a dog was supposedly sent to space and died by the Russians back in the day. Yeah, there are these rumors that the Russians were sending people into space, but they didn't report on it because the first few missions were so risky and the people never came back. That there are like basically skeletons millions of miles away that they were blasting people into space and they just couldn't get it right. I don't know if it's true. I actually think that Yuri Gagarin was fake. He fake died, and that he did come back as Neil Armstrong. Neil Armstrong, some kind of undercover Russian agent? No, just they're all part of the same space fakery. And yeah, and by the way, Neil A. Alien. Neil Armstrong, this isn't really widely known, but the first thing they did when he got on the moon is he performed the Eucharist. He poured wine, ate bread, did a little Catholic ritual on the moon. Tomonoid3 says, the more telling part of the SpaceX launches is when Earth morphs from convex to concave and flat in between. American Father says, remember that astronaut didn't say a word about a giant hurricane that was right next to New York. Good evening, Raft says, let's go. So we talked about this, again, elephant in the room, special effects. Don't let them distract you with trying to debate whether or not there's stellar parallax or any of this stuff. Even the 24-hour sun stuff. The topic needs to remain on worldview and the worldview monopoly and how we arrive at this and what the space station's role is in this. But to me, that is the elephant in the room. The fact that we're looking at psyops and simulations presented as real. And there's so much to undermine the claims made by NASA that it's not something we can do in one night. But the people who just reject the notion of special effects with a hand wave are ignorant, uninformed, gullible, and non-objective. Honestly, they're just triggered. Because we have so many examples, and we laugh at it because it's actually fun. It's funny. Like, I like that one scene where the astronaut's head goes through the ceiling for a minute when they're kicking around the soccer ball. I like the microphone that went through Chris Hadfield's neck. Like, it went into his neck because we're looking at... And then there's jump cuts when he was eating broccoli, I believe. There's so many great examples of fakery. Harness glitches. There are the swollen veins on foreheads, the tomato face from flipping upside down. And I like to see the people with cognitive dissonance doing the cognitive dissonance, trying not to see what they see. Like, okay, that's not a vein, it's a shadow. Okay, well, from the time that he was vertical till he went upside down, not only is there a vein, but his skin went from pale, freckled, to tomato red. His cheeks swelled up. He went from looking like one person, this astronaut, and the next moment he looks kind of like he's been mashed up with Kim Jong-un. And the way his hair was sticking up, it was obvious that the guy was upside down. And even people on TikTok who aren't affiliated with us were laughing at how it looked like they were hanging upside down. It was just painfully obvious. But the fact is, the believers in it will refuse to see it. You can watch them, like they can't confront it. So all they can do is they can impugn you. They can impugn your intentions, attack you. You're a grifter. You're a liar. You're just being incredulous. And it's like, no, I can actually discern 2015 Final Cut Pro graphics. Like, they need to update their software, but again, they can't. Let's Go says, elephant on the space station is a great meme. I did another one. If you got the newsletter, there's two elephants. One of them is in a spacesuit. Ted Stryker says, the fakery is quite entertaining. Lean Dion says, they don't talk about Starman much anymore. Yeah, maybe I'm Mandela affected, but I remember it was going to Mars. And One Eye Jack's song Pope Elon says, "Did you send your car to Mars? Do you sell fake space?" And because it was going to Mars, that was the agenda. They talked about the back of it had a black box and it contained Isaac Asimov's books, the Foundation series. It contained all kinds of books. And then it's got David Bowie playing on an infinite loop, but it's going to Mars. Then some environmentalists started saying something about how the Earth bacteria could destroy any alien life. Musk might have just killed all the Martians. And all of a sudden, the story was, no, actually, it's going to go in this big loop around the solar system. So what did he do? Like remote control it to turn the wheel? I'm sorry, this car was going to Mars, and now it's not. So I don't know. I have to look into it, but I'm pretty sure they changed the story. But that was an embarrassing hoax, and Elon Musk said it must be real because it looks so fake. Okay, I posted another article here. This is at timosman.blog. One of them, of course, the first one I posted was The Elephant in the Space Station, Special Effects and Space Travel. And the second one is called Unconfused. Nobody died. So Unconfused, this is important now, because I think that a lot of truthers have gotten away with feigning some kind of pseudo awareness, enlightenment, by being so open-minded that they're ambiguous about things that other people take for granted. But to me, it just looks like confusion. So there should be no confusion at this stage. Whenever there's a mass shooting reported in the news, we examine it to determine if it's another simulation, an exercise presented as real to the public. Whatever the initial body count, our built-in skeptical framework places it at 0 until evidence confirms the reportage. So if there's a mass shooting and they say 33 people died, our presumption is actually it's 0. We're going to go with 0 until we see some evidence. It's not a matter of how many people, the number is there just to, if it bleeds, it leads. But in all of the mass shooting events, high-profile terror attacks that we've analyzed, none of these body counts have ever been substantiated. So there shouldn't be any confusion as to why we say it's 0 until proven otherwise. Fake until proven real. 0 died until proven otherwise. We're not trying to start with the high number and whittle it down. Like there were so many people, bitter death clingers, who didn't want to let go of the 9/11 jumpers. They're like, okay, I subtract the planes because those were fake. I subtract these numbers because these people could be falsified, but there had to have been some jumpers. At least a janitor died. Give me that. Give me some blood. And I'm like, no. Why do you need to have real death at these events? Like, let it go. All these corpse clutchers, death clingers. It's like, that's what's holding you back from recognizing the totality of the PSYOP entertainment complex's grasp on really the collective psyche. They have people entranced. So let's say, for example, a mass shooting happens and the toll is pronounced at 50. Once the indicators of a simulation are exposed, the number automatically drops to 0. So for example, if you have some goofy, grinning crisis actor happy because he's got a payday coming, or you see too many people with lanyards and water bottles, or predictive programming. If the shooting has concurrent or predictive programming attached to it, then the death toll automatically goes to 0. Because anything casting doubt needs to be considered, especially given what we're examining. This is a standard operating procedure. So there's no case in which a simulation exercise repurposed for propaganda purposes would involve killing real people, regardless of the reported death toll. Anybody maintaining that somebody died or some people died are simply admitting to being confused. That's all they're saying. If they say some people died, but they can't tell you which person, how many, evidence please, they are confused. The mainstream worldview is a world of confusion. And when you cease giving their reportage the benefit of the doubt, when you take your nose away from the screen and you step back 6 feet, then at that point, you exit their world of confusion. And the just asking questions crowd is confused. They spread confusion. The QAnoners are all confused. They are a product of this question everything approach, where they don't seek conclusions. So we need answers, not loaded questions. And here at the IPS think tank, we have answers, even as we continue to explore the questions raised by removing false explanations. But I think at this point, it's essential to push back against the sowers of confusion and the confused. The off-world stage perspective is outside the fog of Psywar, and those who proclaim confusion need to be challenged to explain the basis for the confusion. Auto-hoaxers, skeptics are not confused. And that's because we apply skepticism in a way that rejects mass media confusion at face value. And if you're confused, then, like for example, if you think some people died and you leave it at that, then you're in the fog of Psywar. And at this point, we have certainty, and we need to go ahead and stand on that. LG Rhythms just received the notifications. CMG510, thanks for joining. This is where it's at. Yes, Ted Stryker, thank you. These articles are over at timosmond.blog, and this one here has the painting or rendered image of a penguin with a flaming head, the hot skull. But these are key points because we have to treat, we are essentially marketing a methodology, a philosophy, a way of consuming media analytically and objectively with a full awareness of not only just PSYOPs, which every truther knows about, but the Psywar itself. We put the PSYOPs into context. And in addition, we look at the other layers, the meta-narrative, the meta-script rather, the astrotheological template, the occulty stuff, and the foreshadowing in the entertainment world that overlaps what happens in the news. And we know now the purpose of this is it's for bending the news. Okay, let's move on. Ariana Grande concert attack survivors win UK harassment case. So I happen to think these things are all staged. There are a number of high-profile, you would think auto-hoaxers, who have called out many fake events, who then, in a very targeted way, harass the crisis actors. Case in point would be Strong Thorn journalist who went to jail for this, along with Conspiracy Granny. And he went to 33 different events, he harassed crisis actors, and he offered $100,000 for anybody who could prove somebody died. That tells me he was a Fed, this was an operation, because you can't prove a negative. If he was really serious, he would have offered the money for a whistleblower. But regardless, it made it look like, and this was the basis for Alex Jones. Why is Alex Jones having to pay $1.5 billion? It's not for anything he did. It's because people he convinced that Sandy Hook didn't happen allegedly harassed the various Sandy Hookers. So this was like another example of the alleged crisis actors becoming victims in this scenario, victims of the conspiracy theorists. So to me, this looks like they're giving the public an excuse, a reason, a rationale to further engage in censoring media skeptics. 2 survivors of a deadly 2017 suicide attack on Ariana Grande's concert in northern England in 2017 want a harassment claim on Wednesday against a former television producer who claims the attack was a hoax. Richard Hall was sued. So Richard Hall was sued for harassment, data protection breaches, over his assertion in several books and videos that the Manchester Arena attack was staged. Now, he's 100% correct. It was staged. But the fact that he was stalking these crisis actors to prove they were lying led him to be sued. And of course, I don't think this is going to stop him. I'm not saying this guy's a plant, but I think it's very fishy. And I think it's much more sensible because you're not going to get any information out of some low-level crisis actor. We have the right approach. We're looking at who wrote the script. That's our level of analysis here, as in, what is the purpose of the PSYOP? We've accepted these things are real. We're not trying to expose it to normies by harassing people who are part of it. That's another reason why I say we're parallel, not anti-media. We're not antagonistic. We're not getting involved in that level. But from a off-world stage, ivory tower perspective, we're looking at these psychological operations as having the approval of government at the highest level. And so these are top down. The people at the bottom would necessarily know the least. So I'm far more interested in determining which director wrote this particular script. We got into this a little bit last night. I'm convinced that James Cameron can be credited with the LA riots and the Cop City protests. These have connections to Terminator 2 and Avatar 2, which we discussed yesterday. Marcel Ploger says, I want to see the Epstein list released. And if we have to believe it, that will only happen if Trump is reinstalled. The 4 years Trump was president, he didn't start wars, and the economy was good. Donald Trump faked January 6th. Donald Trump faked the head wound. Donald Trump is a top-tier movie star, crisis actor, magician, world stage historic personage. He's a interesting character, highly entertaining in a lot of ways, but I don't place any stock in the game anymore. Like I'm not even. In fact, I was going to throw away my vote as a protest by voting for Kamala, which is embarrassing to do, but I will do it to make a point. And my point is, the anti-position, which is support Trump because he's anti-establishment, is controlled opposition. And the only rational position is anti-anti, as well as anti-pro. But I'm not telling people not to vote. I'm just saying you're voting for someone who is part of the mass deception, part of this system which has conquered humanity, the newsbenders, the design authority. American Father says, Richard Hall, Rich Planet TV. Yeah, same thing. Esteban says, same thing with Alex Jones. It's a Fugazi case. Yeah, it has to be. It's all theater. And one of the purposes is this. We are examining a forest of fake trees. We realized after our methodology had been tested that they're all fake. So we decided, let's just clear cut the forest of misinformation, which is what the Daily Beast said about us. The Daily Beast had some spies in our Discord, and they said that we were, quote, shitposting to oblivion, and that this is the information equivalent of clear-cutting a forest. And I'm saying, yeah, they're right. And what Alex Jones's job is, and other top-tier conspiracy theorists, is to say, hey, look, this tree in the forest is fake. This one's fake, that one's fake, and this one's fake. And then they run laps around these, holding little red herrings to keep the truthers engaged. But they never expose that every tree in the forest is fake. They'll talk about Sandy Hook, but they won't talk about Parkland. And Parkland's an even better thing to expose because you have characters from Parkland who became real, who stepped off the nightly news TV screen and went from being scripted characters to actively engaged on the world stage. People like David Hogg, for example. And, you know, the Birds Are Fake movement started up, I think, to contrast or to discredit us. And the Birds Are Fake movement, which is a ridiculous proposition, but it was there to discredit people who say that these shootings are faked. And that came out of Parkland. But why aren't they calling out every event in the same way? Why do they act like each one is a toss-up? Maybe it's real, maybe it's fake, let's see. It's because they have accepted the burden of proof, and they give the mass media the benefit of the doubt. Not to mention, most of the people who believe these, or on the truther side, assume the shootings are real, but that they were caused by antidepressants. It's like their typical explanation. But anyway, that's Jones's job. It's to keep people from seeing the big picture. Let's Go said, we should promote the idea to the raft to unregister to vote en masse. It's better than not voting or protest voting. It's a no confidence for a fake system. No, I think that's acceptable. I want to do something that's not acceptable. It's completely rational, acceptable, and commended by some to be a non-voter. It's a statement, but it's a statement that is valid within the game. If you want to really show that you're throwing your wrench into the works, that you're trying to contradict the game, you're trying to expose it as rigged, what better way than to say, what better way to walk the walk than to vote for the opposite candidate that you're expected to? Because if you figured out the mainstream media is full of hoaxery, you're supposed to automatically vote for the other side. You're supposed to side with the anti-media, the people's media, the conspiracy theorists, the Donald Trump calling them fake news. And I'm saying, no, I'm not going to be Pied Pipered in a controlled dialectic. And not voting is acceptable, but voting for the other side that I'm expected to vote on to trigger the people who are acting reflexively, to me, that sounds like it would have the maximum impact. I mean, that's my objective. Marcel says, in my opinion, not voting is better. No, again, I'm doing this to create ripples, and I want to trigger people. And the people who are being triggered are the ones who need to be reached. Because then I can ask them, well, do you really believe it matters? And if so, why are you voting for the guy that faked January 6th, that faked the 7/13 head wound? Why are you voting for the guy that was complicit in a global psyop, 2020? If you think about it, it's like, okay, you got Stockholm syndrome and you're going to go prove it. So no, I will throw away my vote in the worst way possible, behind the worst candidate any of us have ever seen. So here's a snippet from a Twitter debate I was having with a Globster. I'm trying to determine what to call them. I don't like Glurf. I like Gluber, but I think Globster kind of fits. Nasatologists. Okay, so I had a debate with a nasatologist. Oh yeah, let's talk about the satellite that fell as well. But first, I was talking to this nasatologist. His name is Mordwand. And I said to him, I'm not going to start showing you evidence of fakery on the space station until you concede that any evidence falsifies the entire mission and every associated mission, every resupply module, that it exposes a global conspiracy to present a simulation as the real thing. One piece of evidence is all it takes. It's like a domino. If this is fake, then what? Just follow this line of thinking through. If the space station's a simulation, then all the rockets that sent stuff up there were all what? Where did they go? It's a can of worms. But he will not concede. He will not concede. He said, I will not consent to your all or nothing standard. The evidence for space flight is overwhelming. And I said, if you will not concede that false evidence invalidates an observation, then you're not being honest. You want to reserve a spot, a position where you can be subjective and dishonest. But when you're ready to be truthful, I will educate you as requested. And it's because of this person that I will be addressing the space station on Saturday. I'm going to present things that he will have to independently and individually refute one by one. But it was frustrating. It was frustrating trying to get through to this person. I said, our starting point, because he said here, why don't you cut to the chase? If you have something, show it to me. I said, our starting point is your agreement that space travel claims as presented by NASA and other agencies are based on video and photo evidence that are fakeable. If fakery has been employed, then evidence for space travel would therefore be falsified. And he said, I will not play your games. Put up your evidence or shut up. And I said, why won't you be accountable for defending what you're advocating? Just, in other words, these individuals are, I think their faith has been shaken. That's kind of what it feels like here. But he's asking me to do homework for them, and I'm not quite ready to do that. So let's go ahead and look at the story here about the Boeing satellite. And yeah, a number of you guessed it. It's the Boeing satellite called Intelsat 33. Checking out your comments. Observing Reality says Vegas shooting, mass censorship, and the rollout of COVID on all Trump. Hey, the Vegas shooting is consistently being propped up by right-wing influencers. It's a huge part of the QAnon narrative. But anybody defending the claims that people really died at the Harvest Festival should just be considered agents, operatives. So Intelsat 33 or the IS-33E, the satellite lost power due to an anomaly impacting users across Europe, Central Africa, Middle East, Asia, and Australia. The satellite had 8 years in geostationary orbit. So what happened? This was a geostationary satellite. U.S. Space Force confirmed the breakup of Intelsat 33 October 19th. There's 20 pieces. It was a geostationary communication satellite. These are used for internet and mobile communication, broadcast television, and radio signals. Geostationary satellites orbit the Earth at the same rotational speed as the planet, making them appear stationary from the ground. This allows ground antenna to maintain a constant connection without needing to track the satellite's movement. And if you are a NASA-tologist, I just want to let you know that this image is not real. So you're looking at an image of a satellite in space, a stock image. This is not Intelsat 33, the one that broke up. It's not actually a real satellite in space. This is an artist's rendering. So this came out of somebody's imagination. It's beautiful, but it's not real. So my question, just sort of a side question, why don't we have any photos of real satellites in space? Like, I like this airbrush or whatever this is. I like the art. To me, this is religious art. I'm not going to be critical of it. But the Church of NASA-tology's religious art, yes, it's great, but show us the real thing, if it's there. LG Rhythm said, oh yeah, you were there. I had fun in that conversation on X until Mord Wand suggested I take his chart seriously where NASA's budget at the bottom of the list, no short-sighted. Yeah, I like debating people on X to expose something here. And today my objective was to expose that the elephant in the space station that they don't want to talk about, the thing that would really bring some progress to these conversations is special effects. It's an elephant in the room. The pieces of IS-33 will add to the increasing reservoir of space junk orbiting the planet, which could lead to a scenario known as the Kessler Syndrome. Donald J. Kessler. So the Kessler Syndrome refers to a future where the density of objects in low Earth orbit becomes so high that collisions and debris create a cascading effect leading to a runaway situation in which we are locked down on Earth. So it could shut down the ISS. It says here, the Kessler Syndrome could create a debris cloud that could destroy other satellites and pose risks to the ISS. We need to be mindful, says Vishnu Reddy, a planetary defense expert at the University of Arizona. We need to be mindful of mitigating the long-term effects of leaving trash in space, as it will take decades, if not hundreds of years, to remove them, especially at higher altitudes. Recently, we've seen large upper stages, especially from Chinese rockets, falling to Earth. I've been considering perhaps faking, like take an old vacuum cleaner, just hack it up, char it, get some metallic spray paint, maybe put a SpaceX logo on it, and just dig a little hole in your backyard and throw it in there. Snap a picture and then tweet it to your news and say, space junk hit my house. And then have a couple friends say, I saw a fireball coming down from the sky. And I think you could probably get the news to run wild with the story that you got some space junk. And then I'd put it on eBay. We'll sell it, and we'll use that money to sue SpaceX and NASA for mental anguish. We'll get in the market of selling space junk helmets, and then we'll use that money to fund our operations. Like, we should get into the PSYOP business. And I used to spell PSYOP with a $sign because I thought it was primarily about money. But no, it's about mind control. However, It's lucrative. There is money in psyops. I think being a crisis actor is like the new Hollywood. And I think these A-listers who get high-profile roles in big psyops, for them, it's like a status symbol. Like Tom Hanks. I mean, it's like an elitist thing. So take a look at this. This is another example of the state of Trutherville. This is Paul's Corner 1. Paul's Corner posted this image. Someone snuck. Is snuck a word? Someone snuck into an archaeological site that was roped off in North Carolina or Tennessee. Is this more evidence of Egypt in America? See, these people are abusing question marks. And for years I've been saying that at some point the UN is going to send their blue helmet soldiers down the street, kick down your doors, and they're going to take the question marks off your keyboards and possibly the cues. Because why do you need to ask questions? Big Brother is giving you all the answers. That's not good enough for you. That's their rationale. And they're making it look like questioners are problematic. That's why the Riddler, not only was the Riddler sort of a QAnon-like character, but if you look at the imagery, his logo, it had question marks on it. You know, so they're demonizing the questioner. And unfortunately, truthers are falling into the trap of becoming little Riddlers, just asking questions. This is an example of a sower of confusion. So a lot of people see this and like, oh, look, this is in North Carolina or Tennessee. Like, you can't even decide which state it is. It's such an ambiguous claim. So he's suggesting that beneath North Carolina or Tennessee, they found ancient Egypt in America. Like beneath the last mud flood. So, of course, this guy gets a million hits, gets a lot of money, buys a Bugatti, just because misinformation sells. But if you look here, he's been corrected. This was not Tennessee or North Carolina. This was filmed in Guatemala City. This is a historic center in the Highland. This is actually on tripadvisor.com. You can read about it. So this is out of context. He's lying. He's been corrected, and yet the tweet still stands. So why don't these individuals ever remove their tweets when they've been debunked? It's because they're getting paid to lie. Truthers are liars. Every one of them. And if you look here, the numbers are not insignificant. As far as the size of his channel, 192,000 followers. And of course he wouldn't lie because he's a pastor. Father and Bible believer. Unbelievable. How am I even getting this guy in my feed? Who's just going to... This is unconscionable. And it's not even his original footage. This is from TikTok. So what they're doing, what these disinformationists are doing, and what they're being promoted for, is they're taking clips from TikTok out of context, sharing it, and then throwing in a bunch of question marks. Just asking questions. It's like, no, you're just sowing confusion. The HBO TV show The Boys, social media made a parody post about Trump working at McDonald's. So you have the Homelander. Homelander dreamed of working at his local Vodaburger. Recently, his wish came true. They shut down a restaurant and staged pre-selected customers so Homelander could serve people food. Breaking, Homelander serves up high-quality beef. So the story here is that Homelander is basically Donald Trump. And on the season finale of Season 4, Episode 8, this character is in an episode called Assassination Run where somebody gets shot and there's blood on his face. And he's looking at the camera smiling like Trump. So it was such an uncanny resemblance to what happened with Trump. The story was so close that the boys went through and they changed the title of that episode. Other connections, there was a scene where this guy's watching Taxi Driver. We have found a number of connections, predictive programming, concurrent programming. Okay, let's continue. Mango Penguin says, the raft grows. It's nice to see you're making great progress. Tim, believers beware. Oh, yes. I think that AutoHoaxCon is going to serve as a bridge to the uninitiated, the unaware, the uninformed. but those who are facing the right direction. I mean, a lot of people are facing away from the screen. They're trying to get more information. The problem is they get dragged back in through politics. That's why I'm saying throw away your vote. Vote for Kamala. Because voting for Trump acquiesces to the mainstream media simulation, the consensus worldview, the world stage. I'm not a world stager. And I'm not going to vote for a character in a magic show who's debunkable. Trump has been debunked. He's not an autonomous individual fighting for your rights. He is the Homelander. He is Biff Tannen. You're going to vote for the Homelander? You're going to vote for Biff Tannen? He's an amalgamation of all these characters. He's Charlie Coker from A Man in Full. If you look at all these various ways they've represented the Trump that we see, he's a construct. It's an idol at this point. Okay, moving forward. Yeah, large satellite explodes in pieces. We talked about Tim Pool. So Tim Pool is not quitting, but he's downsizing. And it's not a coincidence that he's been named as one of those individuals funded by Russia, by Tenet. And of course, there's a lot of significance to Tenet and Russia, Christopher Nolan, stuff we've, time travel, time control. Okay, so the debate with Mordwand is still going on. I'm kind of over it at this point. They're simply going to cover their eyes and cover their ears and pretend that they're not listening to us. They're going to avoid the elephant in the room. They don't want to acknowledge that special effects might exist, or they're not going to agree that if we demonstrate special effects, they must accept the L. Just accept the L on the ISS. You lost. But they're waiting for me to provide them compelling evidence. But like, I'm not in the business of trying to reach the people who believe all the fake news. Like, these individuals are unreachable. We're only examining them and studying them for the purposes of elucidating our own positions and exposing the error of their ways. Okay, let me go ahead and open up phones. If you want to call in, the phone number is 505-510-4226. Feel free to call in if you're confused or if you believe in orbiting space stations. Large Boeing satellite suddenly explodes into pieces, dubbed IS-33E. It's a total loss. Migration and service restoration plans are underway across the Intelsat fleet. US-based tracking company Exo Analytic Solutions says they're tracking 57 pieces of debris. 57. The ever-present threat of space debris colliding with our assets in orbit, a precarious situation that could lead to disaster. The satellite weighed 14,600 pounds, was the size of a minivan, and was made by Boeing. So another example of Boeing and this general theme, and this ties in, leave the world behind. The communications being shut down. The fall of the Tower of Babel. The sinking of the West. The destruction of the unity of all the nations rising as one to the heavens, speaking one language, being the internet. And this has been a year of disaster for Boeing, from plane parts falling. Recently, a C-17 tail cone almost landed on a Catholic school. And then we have the astronauts stranded in space because of Boeing. And now this. So this is, again, something that we have predicted. We've been talking about this Boeing stuff and how it's become an epithet for disaster. And this is all scripted and fake. And the fact the number 33 is there, I think reinforces my basic claim here that it's staged. And just to prove my point, I asked people listening, what's the nomenclature? What's the number on this particular problematic satellite? And everyone was like, yeah, obviously it's 33. Should not be that predictable. Okay, I'm going to scroll through my Twitter feed to see if I've missed anything. It's been kind of a slow news day. Like there's a build-up. I'm not sure what the next major plot twist is. We're now in Scorpio. When is Trump going to be in Madison Square Garden? And they're doing a lot of the Trump is Hitler stuff. So here we go. Mike Johnson to join Trump at splashy Madison Square Garden rally. Mike Johnson, by the way, believed that there were dinosaurs on the Noah's Ark. Which I don't believe, because if dinosaurs were on Noah's Ark, they would still be around today. Unless they're underground in Egypt, beneath North Carolina or Tennessee. LG Rhythm says, Mordwand admitted he won't allow his sense of reality to be challenged. JG5 says, Space Junk, I need a helmet for Christmas. Yeah, I'm kind of thinking we should get into the business. Kevlar helmets, but they have to be comfortable for sleeping. Because in one of the accounts, it was Space Junk went through someone's house. And then there was this city council member in Canada, and a space rock landed on the pillow next to her. You know, luckily she didn't have anyone there with her, and she was on the right side of the bed. But I thought it was unusual, and this is why I think we could trick the news. They just believe anything. Because they said there were some construction workers nearby, and they saw fireballs. They saw a big fireball coming from the sky. So imagine a big fireball, they hear a whoosh, and then it hits the house. Now, the rock punctures the roof. So how fast does a rock have to go through your roof into your bedroom? How many layers? What is it puncturing through? This fireball. And then it lands on her pillow. So I'm just wondering, why didn't it, at that velocity, go down into the mattress, press it down, and then the bed springs bounce it back up? It doesn't make sense. And there was this story, I think it was from 1956, in Alabama, where a woman was hit by a space rock. The mayor, the police, they all went to her house. Ann Hodges in Alabama. Meteorite strikes a woman, 1954, injured. She's the only human being to have been injured by the direct impact of a meteorite. But I think space junk provides or poses a much greater threat. So in this story, it went through the roof. It bounced off of a bookshelf. I think it hit the TV, and then it hit the couch, and then it bounced across. It's just like it bounced around like pinball. It's such a ridiculous story. But here it is. It's like 8 pounds. And look at that wound. That doesn't look like a wound I've ever seen. You can't sue NASA for space rocks. But if you feel like crisis acting, you know, the space junk thing, how are they going to say it's fake? That's my thing. How are they going to say, oh, that couldn't have happened, it's fake? Like, what is your standard to call it fake? When it comes to outer space artifacts, they all have mind aids. They can't filter that out. This is it, 1954, Ann Hodges was struck by a meteorite. She was at her home with her mother when it came down through the roof, and it bounced off the radio in the room, and then it landed on her hip. The bruise was big. There were reports of people being injured. Anyway, this is the only report. Look how gross and fake it is. It looks realer than Trump's wound. And that was miraculous how fast that thing healed. J. Dig says, George Santos tonight said that Kamala's campaign ends tomorrow with an October surprise. George Santos is a fabulist. He said that his parents died in the Holocaust. His grandparents died in the Holocaust. His parents died in 9/11. And I think he even had some suggestion that he survived Sandy Hook. Like, this guy told so many lies and eventually got exposed for it. And then he got a gig on Cameo and made a ton of money doing cameos. A lot more money like Corey Feldman, for example. Esteban says big girl. Yeah, that's probably what saved her. That was November 30th, 1954. One of the fakest things I've ever seen. They don't even try that hard. Okay, yesterday we talked about Mousegate and what it means, the full implications. This is important. It's important that when you have something like this, you use this to demonstrate the unwillingness of people to perceive for themselves. They will betray their own eyes. If you're looking at Mousegate, you're looking at a mouse. You're looking at an impossibility, but you're looking at a mouse. If you say you're not looking at a mouse, you're lying. It's really that simple. You're lying to yourself, and we think it's funny. Now, you can try to figure out what it means. At a minimum, it means that this footage was pre-produced. It means that this rocket launch didn't really happen. It means it didn't go to the ISS. That's the basis of it. And the idea of the Mighty Mouse going to the ISS, paralleling with this, look, Mighty Mice in space. Mice in microgravity. This alone, and this was the CRS-19, Mighty Mice in Space. This alone shows you that this is an inside joke. And it's like, do you want to be inside on this inside joke, or do you want to be laughed at? Like, Elon Musk isn't laughing at us.
We are sending Mighty Mice to the International Space Station to see how these muscle-bound mice behave in the setting of microgravity in terms of muscle loss. One of the big problems with sending astronauts to space is that they're not subject to gravity in the same way that we are here on Earth. And as a result of that, they lose tremendous amounts of muscle mass.
Now, are they losing muscle mass? I've noticed that they look well fed. Like they're eating a lot of that astronaut food to maintain weight. Every time I look at these astronauts, they are like stuffed into their khakis, which are really well starched, by the way. And it's almost like they're too tight on purpose. They have these tight belts. I'm like, what are they trying to hide? Some kind of rig? Maybe they're attached to a seesaw? Why do you need to wear a tight belt in space anyway? It's like there's nothing pulling down on your trousers. So the mice on the mission were genetically engineered to lack myostatin, a growth factor that limits muscle growth in both mice and humans. But on this very mission, we saw the mouse on the outside of the space station, and it was on their live feed. So then you have to ask, is the live feed a live feed? If it's not a live feed, then what? And that's where it gets into the territory they don't want to traverse. If fake, then what? And that's what we have been doing. We have been following this train of thought and following the logic where it leads, and it pretty much unravels the whole thing. It is a massive house of cards. So again, today I introduced this idea that the elephant in the space station is special effects. My third eye asks a question about what they do with waste on the ISS. It's called astroplastic. Astroplastic is a way that they can turn it into plastic and use it for utensils. So if you go on to the space station, like if I was invited to go to space, I wouldn't use the plasticware. Anyway, thank you for joining. We're going to continue this conversation tomorrow, but I have to finish the flyers tonight for AutoHoaxCon number 2. I'll have those available, and we'll be putting a lot of work into that in the next 2 days, and that's going to happen on Saturday at 3 p.m., and I'll probably go live like an hour before for about 20-30 minutes or something, just to get everybody up to speed on what the plans are for the day. But we're going to deliver a lot of quality content, information, and I think we'll have more people involved for a more extensive Q&A. So we talked about, again, special effects, elephant in the ISS, the news bent history, space junk from Boeing, arguing with globesters. Yeah, that's pretty much it for now. We'll pick this up tomorrow. This is Space is Fake AF.
Into the black void.
Because you can see the stars.
Oh yeah.
You know, and
We were never able to see stars from the lunar surface or on the daylight side of the moon.
It's not a black void. I mean, it's black, but there's all kinds of little polka dots.
Space is fake AF. Space is fake AF.
There's more than stars. You can see planets. You can see moons.
you see the gas.
It don't matter. Say the sky was not the limit. We fly to the moon in another second. But we haven't been back since 1972. Destroyed all the papers and blew up the Challenger crew. Except for the twinsies. Space is fake AF. Space is fake AF.
Look out into deep space away from the sun, it's the darkest black you can imagine.
Hey, space boy, you broke my rocket man heart. Where are the stars? Is it bright or is it dark? The vacuum of space, oh, the tomfoolery.
What happens if you get a leak on that? You have a leak.
Deep under my bubble.
It's hard to comprehend.